And this is what I'm saying, where we can't keep playing this game of I'm just going to blame men for everything. Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So today I will be talking about an article I found in the New York Times that I thought was very interesting. This video will be in relation to the video I made previously entitled Having a Boyfriend is Embarrassing. So this will kind of be like a continuation of that discussion because I found this article to be very, very interesting. So I found this New York Times article and the title was The Trouble with Wanting Men. And this article was written by a woman named Jean Garnett. Okay, and basically she wrote this article in about July of this year. And in this article, she details a bunch of things, right? So essentially, I'm going to be talking about an article by a woman named Rikki Schlott. And that article from the New York Times is entitled New York Times Ridiculous Heterofatalism Embrace is Further Evidence of Sad, Sickly, Post-Millennial Outlook, okay? And she wrote this article in response to the article written by Jean Garnett that was entitled The Trouble with Wanting a Man, right? So just want to start out. So I'm going to start out by explaining that the article written by Rikki Schlott, right, begins by basically saying that she's explaining some of the points that Jean Garnett made in her article. And she's saying that, you know, dating is hard, but blaming all men for women's horrible choices isn't necessarily right, right? So the article that's titled The Trouble with Wanting Men says that the trouble with wanting a man is essentially because of men, if that makes sense. So they're basically saying that the issues with wanting a man is because men are just not really where they need to be. They need to be better. They don't act right. So essentially they're putting all the blame on men, right? So Jean Garnett's article puts a lot of the blame on men and not necessarily explaining like how women play a part in all of this. In this article by Rikki Schlott, which I will be detailing more, she is kind of pushing back and saying, well, what about women? Like, how are we going to leave women out of this equation and how they also contribute to the struggles that they have in dating by some of the choices that they make and whatnot. So essentially she's saying that Jean Garnett's article basically absolves women of any sense of agency or responsibility in their relationships. She explains that there is no introspection or accountability, you know, just the conclusion that men are the problem, right? And Rikki Schlott is saying she doesn't agree with that. There needs to be a sense of introspection that women have when they're reflecting on some of their dating choices. And I completely agree. So the article that's titled The Trouble with Wanting Men by Jean Garnett also says that women are experiencing a sense of heterofatalism, right? And this is a term that I also explained in one of my previous videos. And this is a term that basically describes straight women as being completely fed up with dating, right? Rikki Schlott explains that she thinks that this term, heterofatalism, reeks of misandry, right? And misandry is basically having a sense of, you know, dislike or contempt of men, right? And she doesn't really like this term, and she doesn't like how, once again, the focus is completely on men and where they're lacking, but there's no sense of focus on women and how they contribute to this issue, right? So Jean Garnett also says in her article that she got a text after a date, okay? And the text basically said that she was, you know, it said, I was really looking forward to seeing you again, but I'm going through some intense anxiety today and need to lay low. So essentially after she went on a date, this is a text that a man had sent her, right? Basically saying that he enjoyed meeting her, but he has to lay low. And she was basically explaining in this article that at brunch, her friend group would laugh about men's inability to man up, right? And that there was just basically, you know, men were kind of at fault and they weren't really measuring up to what they needed to measure up to in order to even, you know, be in a relationship with these women, essentially. Rikki Schlott, in basically in response to what Jean Garnett is saying here, Rikki Schlott explains that the fancy words and, you know, the fancy words like heterofatalism and the citations and all these things basically allow, people to like hide behind an academic facade. This is what she thinks. And avoid analyzing whether, your own choices are actually what's making your experiences so miserable, right? So she's trying to say that women are also making choices that are not right. And that's not being talked about. Not everything can just fall on men, is essentially what she's trying to say. So Schlott says that what Garnett has done in her article titled The Trouble with Wanting Men, is a problem because she sees it as us versus them, right? Instead of her, Jean Garnett trying to come to a conclusion as to what's going on with the term heterofatalism and why women are fed up with dating, she's instead just saying, it's men versus women. Men are not measuring up. Almost like there's this sense of like a war going on, right? And it kind of takes away from the sense of I. How do I play a part in what's happening? Instead of just pointing a finger and saying, these people are the issue, right? And I completely agree with Schlott. I think that a lot of women don't take enough accountability, right? So I just want to say that, yeah, women do need to practice more of a sense of discernment when it comes to dating and, choosing a partner. Basically, discernment basically means like the ability to have sound judgment on someone. I think that when women definitely get vibes and feelings and just intuition, like there's certain things that we know, or even like flags that are glaring us in the face that we just choose to ignore. And all of these things have consequences, right? And some of the consequences of ignoring these yellow and red flags that we see on dates. And then this adds to that sense of feeling tired of dating, right? Which is basically that term heterofatalism, because you're not necessarily making, the right choices, the choices that should be made, right? And you're choosing to ignore flags that should not be ignored, if that makes sense. So Rikki Schlott goes on to say that a lot of problems would subside, right? A lot of the problems that women are having in dating would subside if women stop throwing themselves at men within the first 30 minutes of knowing them and pursuing men who give you yellow lights. She says to stop blaming everyone else, straighten out your own life, and get a little agency. Schlott acknowledges, right, that there are a lot of troubles with modern dating. So she's agreeing that there are a lot of issues. But articles regarding the discussion of heterofatalism amplify voices of the most bitter and dysfunctional individuals who she thinks bring misery upon themselves and distract from the actual issues at hand. So Schlott is saying, we can't just sit here and feel bad when people are telling these sob stories of what they're experiencing or this and that, because we're not thinking about how these people are also contributing to their experiences. That's essentially what she's trying to say, that it's a two-way street. We can't just be looking at men and say, hey, men are not measuring up. That's just not fair, essentially. Basically, Rikki Schlott ends the article by probing the question, is the problem all men? Or is the problem the way that some women choose to navigate relationships with men? I thought this was a very thought-provoking way to end the article, and I think that it's something that needs to be talked about more. We live in a society where I do think that unfortunately women kind of are very quick to just say, oh, men are the issue, without ever really reflecting on how they contribute to some of the things they experience as well, right? Like, I know that there's certain things that are out of our control. For example, as a woman, you can't control if you're getting cheated on, right? But there are certain things that we can control, right? We can control the choices we make. We can control the men that we decide to let into our lives, the ones that we decide to take seriously, the ones that we decide to give a chance. And there should be better judgment when making these decisions. That's what I think. There needs to be better judgment, because better judgment will lead to less, hopefully will lead to less, of that sense of feeling tired of dating, feeling like, oh, all my experiences have been terrible, right? And I think that being pickier as a woman about who you let into your space, right, is very important. Very, very important. Yeah, and I just wanted to say, like, I know as women, we all have that one friend that is seeing a guy that's no good for her, but she just won't stop seeing him. And you'll meet with this friend, and they'll tell you about what's going on and how awful this guy is. And your friend might even say, you know what, I'm planning to leave him. She'll say it's over, right? I'm over it. I'm planning to leave him, and then you find out they're still together. I'm sure we all know this friend, right? Or the friend that is actively dating, right? And explaining like, hey, I went on this date and went out with this guy, and she's telling you something that's clearly a red flag, right? But she doesn't want to let it, like, she's like, oh, I have to keep seeing this guy. Like, she still wants to see what could happen. In the back of your mind, you're thinking, what is she thinking? Like, this guy's not into her. That's such a bad sign. But your friend is like, I want to see where this goes, right? And these are all situations in which, the signs are coming that are saying you should probably let this be, but women are just surpassing those signs, right? And let's keep it real. Like, I have girlfriends that have, entertained men because even though they're red flags, they have a lot of money, right? Or they're very, very attractive, right? So there's certain attributes that maybe you can tell that they're putting above the behavior that's concerning, right? And they're like, well, even though he's doing this and that to me, he's funding a certain lifestyle that I live, or he looks like Chris Brown, like the bar is like, come on, so if these are the things that you're going to be valuing, and then you're going to be coming on the internet talking about how men, are this and that, that's not fair, right? Because that completely takes accountability away from how you've contributed to these experiences. So in that sense, I very much agree with, what Rikki Schlott is saying in her article. I think that in life in general, it is always good to have a sense of how you contribute to the experiences that you're having, because I think that gives you an enormous sense of agency and also control, to know that what is happening to you is not something that's completely out of your control. I'm not saying that you can control your entire dating experience. That's not what I'm saying. But you can 100% control the people that you decide to let into your life, that you decide to get close to, right? And I think that using discernment, right, and a sense of, okay, I'm not going to ignore this red flag. If I see something, this person's not right for me, being able to walk away is really important. You can't say, oh, because you're lonely, you want to let somebody in, or, because this person has a lot of money. Like, at a certain point, you have to be able to make these sound judgments to say, maybe this person isn't right for me, right? And saying that men are the problem completely strips women away of this ability to take that sense of accountability. And I think that's very, very important. Even I've done it before. Me, myself, I have done this before. I have been that girlfriend that's complaining to all my girlfriends about a man that I should not be seeing because he's not good for me. Even I've done this. So if I'm able to say that and reflect on that, other women should be able to do the same. I think it's a healthy thing to do, because I think it's a very good step to hopefully dating better and making better choices. In order to make better choices, you have to have a sense of reflecting on where you've gone wrong in the past, right? And completely blaming men for their bad behavior doesn't give you the ability to reflect on what you could be doing better and the choices that you could be making that could lead you to better results in the dating world, right? So these are all things that I think are important. And I really like this article because I thought I completely agree with the points that she's making in this, and it's something that I'm honestly actively working on. It's not an easy thing to do, right? Because it's a sense of taking accountability for your actions and saying, you know what? I shouldn't have kept seeing this guy. Maybe I am part of the reason why this didn't work out. That's not an easy thing to do for some people, but it's something that women need to do. I think it can only be beneficial to getting better dating results in the end. And so Schlott just, is saying that it should not be men versus women. We need to see this as, how can I also, contribute to making my dating experience better? We can't paint all men with the same brush. Women don't like it when men paint all women with the same brush and call all women gold diggers or this or that. We also can't do that to men. We can't say, all men are like this or all men are not. Like, that's not fair, right? That's not fair to do to any gender on either side, right? There has to be something more that we look into. So the last thing I'll say is, like, as women, we can't really put everything on men when it comes to dating. And I think putting the blame on men is unfortunately women's default when things don't go right in their dating life. And that's just, to me, not fair, because you're only seeing things from one side and you're not taking the ability or having the ability to reflect on how you have been involved in this process as well, right? Because dating is a two-way street. People are not just dating and terrible things are happening to them. Let's keep it a buck. Like, a lot of people are entertaining people that are wrong for them, that are showing clear signs of not being right, and they're continuing to pursue this person, right? So another example that I'll bring up, because I thought about this since I watched the most recent season of Love is Blind, is, I'm sure if anyone didn't see the show, there's a woman on there, her name is Casey. I believe she was 30 when she got on the show. She was explaining how in her past relationship, she's always been cheated on. And you see her explaining on the show that, the guy that she was talking to prior to coming on Love is Blind always had another hot blonde around the corner, right? Almost to kind of say that Casey was very aware that she wasn't the only woman that he was entertaining, right? So if you're somebody who's been cheated on a lot in the past, why as a woman would you even entertain a man who is clearly entertaining other women? And this is the type of stuff that I'm talking about, right? Where on the show, Casey says, I just want to be with a man that's going to treat me right. She doesn't want to be cheated on anymore. But the first step to that is probably avoiding men that are entertaining other women. That's going to be the first step, right? Especially if you know that you've been cheated on in the past. And to me, if a man is talking to other women or acting like you're not, he can even get better than you, right? Or that's not a good sign. That's usually the sign of a man that will not be, faithful to you, right? And obviously Casey cannot control that these men are cheating on her. I'm not saying that, but she can control the choices she makes. And she can control the fact that she should probably not entertain the kind of man that's going to do that, right? Or that is clearly talking to other women. And this is what I mean by, instead of Casey just saying, hey, all men are cheaters, or being frustrated with the dating process, right? And saying, I just want a man that won't cheat on me. She also has to take accountability for the fact that she's talking to men that she actively knows are entertaining other women. And this is what I'm saying, where we can't keep playing this game of, I'm just going to blame men for everything. That's not fair, right? And it completely absolves us of our ability to do some introspective work on the choices that we make in the dating, environment. And that's very, very important. So I was just going to say that we should be asking things like, how can I choose better in the dating process and not entertain men that display problematic behaviors, right? Instead of us wanting to know why men can't be better. That, to me, is the type of question we should be asking in order to have better results in this part of our lives. So please let me know what you guys think. I thought this article was really interesting. I'm going to link both articles down below. I'd love to know your thoughts. Even if you completely disagree with anything I've said, or you have completely different thoughts and opinions on this, I'd love to hear it. Please like, comment, and subscribe at the bell. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.